this computer. Okay, so it looks like we're recording. I want to welcome everyone. My name is Lizzie Moore, and I'm with 350 Placer. And before I get into the content of this and welcome our wonderful guest, Tianna Arredondo, I wanted to just give you a quick background about who I am and why I'm here. So I'm going to share my screen. One thing I want to say is that I am not technically savvy, so I would hope that you would please forgive any technical snafus that I might present to you all. So 350 Placer, what is it? Well, it's a local chapter of the international grassroots organization 350.org. And as a group, we're committed to clean, sustainable living in Placer County. 350 is a really important number because it's the parts per million of carbon that's thought to be safe and sustainable for life on our planet. And we recently measured as high as 416. So we're well above what's considered safe and sustainable for life on our planet. What we're committed to doing is helping reduce carbon levels. 350 is the goal. And if you're interested in finding out more about us, if you live in Placer County, you can find us at 350placer.org. And how we focus our energy right now is through educational events and presentations and calls to actions and presentations like this. So we'd love to talk to you. You can just go to the website and sign up for our emailer, or send us an email, and we can go from there. So many of you may know this already, but in 2018, the IPCC and the US government both put out pretty stark warnings saying that we had about 12 years to reduce climate change. And it doesn't mean getting back down to 350 parts per million in 10 years, 10 or 12 years, but it means, oh, and I'm sorry, I should say that, again, this is part of the technical part. I am home. It's the era of COVID. I have dogs and kids, so sorry for all of that. But so these two reports said that we had 12 years to limit climate change and basically head in the other direction. We need to be reversing our course and heading downward as far as carbon levels. And that was 2 years ago. So now we have about 10 years to limit climate change. And then, of course, what's happened recently is the killing of George Floyd and other Black people. And I know as a white person that that racial justice and climate justice are inextricably connected, and that we have to address both to solve our problem of a warming climate. So with that being said, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hop on over to Tianna and I. I wanted to introduce you. So again, this is Tianna Arredondo, and she is the California and Hawaii regional organizer of 350.org. And again, that's the international organization that we're a local chapter of. And right after George Floyd was killed, I emailed Tianna as a representative of 350.org, and I really wanted to talk about racial justice and climate justice. So I wanted to welcome you, Tianna, and in a minute, I want you to talk a little bit about yourself, and I have lots of questions for you, but thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Grateful to be here.
Great. So before we get into our conversation, I wanted to do a little housekeeping. The first is I have kids and dogs, as you heard, so I apologize for any barking that is going on. Also, it's just you and I. It's not technically a beautiful or maybe entertaining presentation, but I hope people will stay for the conversation. And the most important thing that I want to say is that I'm a white person. I'm doing a lot of inner work. I have for a long time, but that I know that I'm afraid that I'm going to say something that's ignorant. And if I do say something that you notice that I could be challenged on, I really want to welcome you to say something. I also want to ask, as we get into this conversation, that you speak, directly and bluntly about race and climate. We don't have a lot of time to talk today, and I just want to get right to the core of the issue. So if that sounds okay with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. A little bit about myself is that, I live on Ohlone and Yokuts territory between Fresno, California and Oakland, California. I've grown up in California my entire life, and what brought me to this work is the juxtaposition between living in Santa Cruz, where the wealth is weirdly distributed, neighborhoods overlap, you can eat food from the ground, the ocean is there, seeing the ocean become destroyed and polluted, and seeing what was happening with our local government, and then moving to Fresno and growing up in the complete opposite, dry, conservative, oddly resourceful space, but not accessible to brown and black people, can't breathe the air. It was so confusing to grapple with growing up. And my father's passing due to chemical externalities is what introduced me to organizing, as our family pursued that path after his death. And so I've been kind of within faith organizing and working within the different buckets of organizing, whether it be research or programming or transformative leadership, coaching. I've been in this arena for a while now, and what led me to 350 was the last few years of my work have been around just transition, working with other activists, arts activists, and leaders within these spaces at Power Shift Network through the Frontlines to Power program, and also going to COP23 and organizing at the Global Climate Action Summit with other youth from around the globe and the state of California. So I have been at the Zoom Out International UN space and on the grassroots on the ground where I live and in other states. So yeah, I've always been hungry for understanding what are the systemic issues, how do we get to the root issue, why hasn't this been fixed? And just speaking on at 350, what aligned me with working here is 350 is focusing specifically onto a 100% renewable energy for all. And the way they're doing that throughout the globe is trying to shut down current fossil fuel projects and new ones. And a lot of that organizing is intersectional. It is multiracial, multicultural. And what's important to me and what aligns with my personal values is that we are working to shut down polluters and let them know they cannot do what they're doing, and be an advocate with folks on the ground, helping them to get a just transition and understanding what is next. And lastly, because 350 is working so that dirty energy does not benefit any longer. And we've had huge wins from the UC system, completely divesting recently, and getting other banks to divest. And I could go on forever. There's more on the website if you would like to look, but that's a little bit about me and what brings me to this work.
Oh, well, that's great. So basically, all that is to say is you have a lot of credibility to talk with me today. I really am excited to hear what you have to say. Well, I think maybe we could start out, especially for people who might be watching this, who don't understand the connection between climate justice and racial justice. I know this is something, I mean, I could talk for hours, and you've been doing the work, more in depth. So I know you could talk for a long time, but could you talk a little bit about the connection between climate and racial justice, and why it's important? Like we can't solve the climate problem without addressing the issues of equality. And could you speak to that, and also how that inequality shows up for whether it's you or other people of color?
Yeah, I'll start with inequality. I think that inequality, equity, diversity, multiracial, intersectional, winning, all of these buzzwords have taken over these green spaces in a lot of ways. And it really comes down to like simple facts. Brown and Black people, Indigenous people, we live in neighborhoods and zip codes where our air kills us. We are more, and here in Fresno at least, where I live, you have a 20-year less life expectancy, and white people live on the fringes of the city or other parts of the city where the air is cleaner, right? White people have parks, we do not. White people have many grocery stores, we do not. So it's like, and I'm in the middle of the city, I'm not even all the way on the other side, right? So the further you go, the further blacker or browner it gets in a lot of cities throughout the country, the more food deserts there are, the more neurotoxins there are in people's bodies. So climate justice is solely the malnourishment of Indigenous, Black, and Brown, and those who do not have economic access. That is what we are looking at. We are watching the polluters and these companies with lots of money put their factories in our neighborhoods. We're watching them be okay with kids in school not having properly nourishing meals, right? So when it comes down to it, all of that actually impacts us beyond just daily living. So the criminalization of Black and brown bodies is inherently climate injustice, because you also have people who do not have the nourishment they need in their bodies, which causes gut problems, which causes mental health problems, which causes people to live in ways where they can't perceive their reality, because of the privileges of folks who are nourished, of folks who have their needs met. They can't communicate with us in a lot of the same ways. We don't make sense because we're living in completely different worlds, in different realities, different lenses. It comes back down to the soil of the earth. That's our bodies, right? So the same way that these polluters are literally, fracking and injecting formaldehyde and other things into the earth to pull out gases, to pull out what they want, and leaving the earth a wreck and causing destruction, that is happening within Black and brown and Indigenous bodies. In poor folks' bodies, we are being left without what we need to survive, and we are being completely overwhelmed by mental unrest, emotional unresolved situations, because we cannot fend for ourselves, we cannot have what we need, and we live different. So when we look at just those two worlds in itself, it's literally two different worlds of people who have their needs met, who have what they are looking for in life, who have access to that. And then many of us who, I have a lot of privilege having degrees and having a place to live and having a really, really, really loving community, right? That wasn't always my story, and it's been a journey to get there. And when we look at climate injustice, not only we can't just do the work. This is the second part of what I'm saying, right? So that's the main issue, malnutrition and literally killing the earth to make a profit. But what that leads to is people saying they're doing the work, and doing the work looks different for everyone at every point in life, right? So we can't just talk about science without talking about the prison system. We can't just talk about science without talking about big ag. We can't just talk about science without talking about Black maternal birth rates. Like, we cannot just talk about science and talk about how we're going to save the earth. We have to constantly be reminding folks wherever we're at that this is all intersectional and it all feeds into one another. So in your bigger question about George Floyd's killing, I know you were mentioning like, oh, at 350 we focus on inequality and inclusion and equity. That's because all around the globe on different teams, we are a NGO, a nonprofit, right? So there's that bureaucracy, but we work really hard to try to like push, or I'll use I statements in my role. I know I work very hard. I won't put that on everyone, but I do try to like break through these barriers to like actually find out, okay, we can't just say we're doing DEI work, we're doing diversity work. The white people in these local groups that I am connected with, I'm like, okay, great. But what language are you putting in that bill that's actually going to help Black people? How many Black people, how many Indigenous people, how many brown people are actually on your coalition? And how often are you talking in your meetings? And are you going to white accountability groups? Have you read a book on decolonization? Are you aware of your implicit bias? Like, so there's a lot that goes into it. And I'll stop there because that was a lot of information.
Well, I could listen to you for hours. Yeah, it really strikes me that, well, I wouldn't say anything good has come out of it, but George Floyd's killing, I think, brought to light for many people, and it's really unfortunate that it took, hundreds of years and so many deaths and everything. But you were talking about how people of color, live in a different way because of all those factors. And as an aside note, we did a presentation about a month ago, and it was all about the connection of health and the climate. So if anybody's interested, those links are on 350placer.org as well. And it really goes more in depth as to how climate change is affecting health, and those health issues affect people of color more. So again, it is, you know, all interconnected. But what strikes me is even looking at the plastic problem, a lot of white people all of a sudden are like, oh, we have a plastic problem. Well, you know why? Because we're not able to ship our recycling overseas anymore. And all of a sudden the plastic is in our backyard. Oh, you know, and as long as, if you don't tackle this issue from a heart-based, what's fair, what's right, what's just, what's being human perspective, even just self-preservation, as long as we have any group that we can push the power plants off to, or the food deserts off to, or the plastic off to, we are hurting ourselves. And so it's like the understanding that the understanding of how interconnected we truly are. And that statement, I mean, I've heard it many times, but until everybody is lifted up, none of us will be okay. And so it's just that understanding. And I don't really have a question here. I'm just kind of reiterating what, you know, and another thing that you said is, I've been listening to Ibram X. Kendi's book on how to be an anti-racist, or becoming anti-racist. I'm sorry, I'm not, but it's about anti-racism, and the idea that it does come down to policies, and having in our policies language and people who are creating those policies who are for equality. So I really appreciate everything that you said, and I'm sort of like, I know I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but I'm kind of letting it all seep in and everything. And so I guess the question is, I know I have a hard time, like when George Floyd was killed, obviously we're in the time of a pandemic and there's health issues that are happening, but George Floyd's death, I mean, upsetting isn't like, I just, you know, it's taken me and it's taken us to a different level. And I think as a white person, or coming from a white culture, I tend to be very transactional rather than relational. And that's something that I'm learning is to like do business a little in like a little less of a white manner, like to be more relational. But one of my strengths is I tend to be very focused on action and trying to change things, because it's like when I see something's wrong, I want to fix it. I want to do better, and I want all of us to do better, and I want the planet to do better. And I have a hard time focusing on, should I be focusing my energy on learning how to be on the anti-racist side of the continuum? Where should I focus my energy? Because there is an urgent, like today, need for racial equality. And the clock is ticking with climate change and the effects of climate change. So how are you navigating the need to prioritize like climate justice, racial justice? Like what actions, what should we be doing? Like, let's say for the next 6 months, because there's just so much to work on. And I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed. I know I feel overwhelmed, and I just don't know where to best put my energy.
Yeah, okay. A lot to unpack.
I'm sorry, that was a lot too. That was just a rant, but
let's see. Well, I think that in regards to whiteness, you know, there's something, I have a white mother, right? I'm Black, Mexican, white. And I know that what I've learned from navigating these worlds and not really fitting in or understanding white culture is there is this urgency behind everything to like fix or to be okay, to be on a schedule, to understand. And I think that is all an illusion of control, because white people inherently have control and have freedom and have privileges that I have no idea what that feels like, right? And I think that when it comes to feelings of I have to fix it, I think the first piece of advice I could offer is just like, for many people, there's not a fix. And believing that there can be a fix can perpetuate narratives and stress and tension and transactional behavior that actually is more harmful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage, like, I'm just throwing out books at this point, The Color of Law. I would encourage Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Maree Brown. I would encourage, I don't know, any Unlearning Whiteness materials out there, because I think that if you are going to go into this thinking that you can completely fix something, or that you're saving something, that there's another type of power dynamic and privilege that like comes into that work and really interferes with the relationship. I've experienced that in faith spaces where, like, my whole life, you know, they were offering scholarships or offering any type of, like, we're going to go build wells in Africa, you know, and I'm asking the pastor, like, why don't we just give $40,000 to the Black kids in the West Side? Like, they need PG&E bills paid, backpacks. Like, they're not in Africa, but I mean, like, we out here, you know, and then having someone tell you what the solution really is. So I think starting with recognizing that you don't have the solutions, that if you're not listening to other people for those solutions, it's probably not a good plan and probably not a good idea. It's a great place to start, because that calls in just listening, and listening without judgment, and listening without having to respond, but just practicing, like, actually fully listening to try to understand what another person is saying. And just a sound check, quarantine. I have a roommate moving back in the background.
Okay.
And then when it comes to 6 months and what to do, and talking about George Floyd's death, I think, unfortunately, there are so many George Floyds. I know you said that, like, what good has come from this? And I mean, you know, I think about his daughter talking about how her dad changed the world, and it's like, true. Also, I wish this was unique. Like, I wish this was rare, but it's not. And so I think that looking at a holistic lens, it can be really easy. Like, take care of yourself first, so you have your oxygen mask before you're out here trying to save the world. I've seen a lot of white leaders who run into the work and burn out. And I'm not talking cute burnouts. I'm talking mental breakdowns, autoimmune disease, like burnt into the ground. I'm not with my spouse anymore. I haven't seen my kids. Don't get lost in the work. Like, don't do that. It's not worth it. Take time to actually build relationship with people, so that you're not drained and alone and hurt and broken and isolated. This work isn't meant to do alone. And this work is not glamorous. It's not cute. It's not trendy. The revolution is like a thing now. Everyone wants to be an organizer. This work is just handed off. There are generations of people who have come and done the work before us. And there are generations of white people who have come and done this work before. So it's like, learn about what that looked like, and just engage in what's already existing. A lot of times people want to recreate things right away. If there is a literal unique need, right? Like, there's a hog, we're in California, let me not use hog farm as an example. If they're about to install an oil well, you know, 3 houses down from you, sure, start a new organizing group to go after that if there's not one existing. But if you're looking to get in and support something that's already happening, how can you just do outreach where you're at to learn about what's happening on the ground? That's a huge thing that I notice people missing often, especially now. People want to, like, start their own mission, their own vision. That's beautiful and great, but it's important to learn from others and be in community while you're doing this work. In regards to the next 6 months, the election is really important, right? Contacting local groups. I'm just giving lots of different ideas,
No,
right?
that's wonderful. That's exactly what I want.
Yeah. So doing teach-ins, hosting. I know a local group in Santa Barbara is doing, like, Tupperware parties online. So they're having, like, conversations and talking about all kinds of different topics to help people get engaged, and gonna just guide them to their next steps and calls to action, right? So it's like, in what ways can you engage people? Can you drive people to the polls? Can you get educated on who are actual climate champions? And not only that, but are they supporting Black and Brown, Indigenous communities, impoverished communities, marginalized communities? Other ways to help: have talked with your white family members. When people are talking about defunding the police, do you know why we want to defund the police? Do you understand community care models? understand your opinions so that you can communicate them with others, right? And like lastly, I don't want to give too many options because I'm already running my mouth. I think just, yeah, in regards to climate work specifically, there are so many organizations that have ongoing initiatives, that have ongoing work. Just get plugged in, reach out. I can't stress enough community. I know at 350 we have the Solidarity School we're going to be running pretty soon here, so there'll be more on that. I can send an email so you can blast that. We have Climate Congress. We're working to get people into Congress that are actually going to support climate with tangible ways. Let's see. And yeah, there are local groups throughout the country. I also recommend, especially white folks, if you want to help move money and resources and attention, white people have power. That's like the truth at the end of the day. Find Black, Brown, Indigenous-led organizations on the ground and just get people to donate to them. Like a lot of the work that happens doesn't necessarily need money. We have different ways of existing outside of capitalism in these communities. Like we trade, we just love each other, we hold space for each other, we host rent parties for each other. Like we're doing other ways of existing and surviving. But when it comes to sustaining the work, especially in a recession, move that money, right? So that's what I can think of. Other basic stuff: petitions, sign them, create them, read them. Nonviolent direct action trainings. If you're going to go to the streets, learn about them. A lot of people are going out there reckless. It is good to be in contact with the organizer. It is good to be in contact with the team. A lot of times when you're doing a nonviolent direct action that is thoroughly organized or supported, there will be like lawyers, a phone number for help. You'll know who's helping you with police contact. Like there are different ways to organize support systems and barricades and supplies. So all of those are technical ways. And lastly, I cannot stress enough, take the time to heal, take the time to rest, listen to your body. I know in my own experience, I've been nonstop since Trump was elected, and now I'm having to slow down a lot. And it's in my mind, I'm like, no, it's not the time. Now's it. It's like, it's never going to be the time to rest. If you're waiting for the time, there's not going to be one.
Right.
So take the time. Organizing will always be happening. Just like you said, you have so much credibility. I am here on the back and the shoulders and the graves of people before me. This is not about me. This is not about how great I am. I'm just a piece of sand on the beach in this work, right? And we all are. So figuring out ways to just be in community and to be yourself while being with others is really important, because there's only one you, and there's only this present moment. So it's like meeting your needs and helping others to meet their needs after yours have been met is really important. So that's what I got.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Well, I think that that's probably enough for today, unless there's anything that that I'm missing about climate and racial justice, and really understanding the intersection and, you know, our reaction. Is there anything else I should be asking you that I'm not while we have this platform?
I think that the key 3 things is do the work. Understand that if you're going to ask for the mental, emotional labor of Black and Brown people, Indigenous people, compensate them. It doesn't have to be some crazy thing, but like if you're constantly asking your friends to educate you, if you're asking your friends to educate you that are non-white, compensate them or find a white person to help you. It is exhausting. It is important to do it together, but just knowing that boundary and knowing that threshold, balanced, you know. We don't all have the answers. I don't speak on behalf of all Black or Brown people, right?
Right.
And no white person's perfect. No one's perfect. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for authenticity, transparency, reciprocity, and interdependence on one another. So making sure that there's a balance there and not a savior complex or not a taker complex, not, you know, just trying to reverse a lot of that is important. So keeping yourself aware of that. Second, just stay plugged into something somewhere that aligns with what is important to you. And then lastly, like technical ways you can get plugged in with 350.org. You can check out our website. We have local groups you can get involved in. If there's not one where you're at, you can start one. We have tons of resources. I can send you some on unlearning whiteness, dismantling white supremacy, organizations to get connected to, petitions to sign, funds to donate to. So we offer a lot of different solutions and resources so that people can get plugged in, you know, wherever they would like to, wherever they can. And lastly, just be gentle. Like, slavery wasn't that long ago. This is a lot to unpack. There's a lot going on. The urgency is real. If you got the energy, nice. But also understand that urgency is also very, it's just an interesting thing, because the planet is literally on fire and all of this stuff has been happening. So just make sure to balance that with community is all I could say.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. And I hope that lots of people watch this and take away as much as I have already from it. And I might even watch it again just to absorb more of what you have to share. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing in the world as a human. And I appreciate the work that you're doing for 350.org, because we are all in this together. And I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for the work you're doing. Good luck with your masters and your family and your health.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, I am going to stop the